A paradise for the desert lover. Millions of acres of flora and fauna unduplicated anywhere on the continent. Craggy mountain peaks, deep canyons, and of course the comforts of the oasis known as Phoenix. 10 miles east of Phoenix, on the way to Tucson, there's an oasis of another kind, Firebird International Raceway Park. Hello everyone, I'm Steve Evans. We've come to Firebird today to bring you coverage of the National Hot Rod Association's 3rd annual Castrol GTX Fall Nationals. We'll be showing you the ground-shaking, nitro-burning funny cars, bullet-fast, supercharged, top alcohol dragsters, and the always fascinating competition eliminator. Well, every drag racing fan knows the big story in funny car racing this year, superstar Kenny Bernstein. He has already clinched his 3rd consecutive Winston World Championship and has won 7 races this season. That ties a decade-old record held by Don the Snake Prudhomme. But in the last month, Bernstein seems to be losing a little of that competitive edge. At Maple Grove, Pennsylvania, 3 weeks ago, defeated by Mark Oswald. Two weeks ago, Dallas, Texas, Eddie Ace McCullough dropped the king in the semifinals and took his elapsed time record at 5.36 seconds. Same weekend, Mike Dunn, he took Bernstein's speed record, the first ever 280-mile-an-hour blast in a funny car. John Force also closing in, running competitive numbers with Bernstein. Well, to get the inside story, I went to, not the drivers, but the men who build the power, the crew chiefs. Austin, what has happened in the last year to allow cars like the one you prepare to get closer to Kenny Bernstein?
Well, it's just we're learning some things he found out a long time ago by running high-flow billet cylinder heads and a tremendous amount of fuel volume in the system.
You feel you're there now?
Well, I feel we're awful close. I think those guys are having a little bit of problems lately. Has allowed us to make it a little easier on us to catch up, but I think we're very close.
Bernie Federley, the 5:36 at Dallas, does that indicate that you've caught Kenny Bernstein performance-wise?
Well, I'm not really sure of that. It's one weekend they're under ideal conditions, and they've been able to run well on lesser tracks. And so I think that if we can run well the next 2 events, then maybe we have something going. Right now, it's just sort of theory. We think we have something going, but it's real hard to tell at this point. The facility is so good over there. It's just the racing surfaces just conforms to our combination. The air was very good, and it's just one of those things that we kind of hit it right. But if we can do it again, then we'll know we got it.
Leonard, what we've seen in the last month would indicate there's 4 cars, including yours, that can run with Kenny Bernstein. Do you feel confident now that you've caught up?
Yeah, I think most of the field is catching up. The top 8 or 9 cars are starting to creep up on him pretty well now.
What took him a year and a half to do it?
I think it was most of the clutch thing. We're learning how not to gear the car so high and get it off the starting line and how to make it work, and the ETs are coming back.
Dale, there's some, including your fellow crew chiefs, who feel the competition is catching up to you. There's others who say Kenny's clinched the title and you're just experimenting. Which is it?
Well, it's a little of both. The competition has stepped up pretty good. There's some guys I'm noticing that their car is reacting a lot like ours has been for the last couple of years, and they're moving in on us, but we are in a period now of experimentation. 2 weeks ago we clinched the title, and we've got quite a few different things on the car now that we're playing with this year to get ready for next year.
Some surprises for them in '88?
Oh, I think if the experiments work out, there may be some surprises for them this year yet.
Well, apparently those experiments need some more work. Bernstein was defeated earlier today in round 1 action. That's Bernstein in the far lane. In the near lane was Eddie Ace McCullough. McCullough crossed the finish line strike first, 5.58 seconds to Bernstein's 5.76. For more on today's action, let's go to Paul Page.
Well, Steve, as you mentioned, we're also doing top alcohol dragster along with funny car and, of course, competition eliminator. Earlier in the qualifying for funny car, Mark Oswald, the #1 qualifier, with a 5.49. In competition eliminator, this man, David Nickens, in his C Econo Altered, was the low qualifier. We'll talk about the indexes a little bit later. And in top alcohol dragster, Bruce McDowell, low qualifier with a 6.33. Well, now let's take the opportunity to look at the top alcohol dragster. In this case, it's Denny Lucas's machine, and as you can see, it looks a great deal like any top fuel dragster, even to the engine components, except, of course, it runs on alcohol. And because it does, there's a lot of changes internally here, including a much higher compression ratio. Back in the gearbox department, we're running 3 speeds here rather than 2, as you would see on the top fuel dragster. Additionally, they have a weight limit on these machines based on the horsepower that they're actually producing. The good news is that if you run one of these, the alcohol fuel is a whole lot cheaper than running the nitro.
Okay, thank you, Paul. A capacity crowd on hand here in Phoenix, Arizona. A hot, dry, beautiful day, and everybody is up and ready for the second round of the Nitro Funny Cars. And in the first of 4 battles, we'll be seeing this man, Ed the Ace McCullough. As we said earlier, the new world record holder at 5.36 seconds. He will be in the near lane with his Oldsmobile-bodied funny car, smoking the tires on what they call the burnout. His competition will be a young man from Ypsilanti, Michigan, 26-year-old Scott Coletta. Scott Coletta, the son of the veteran Connie Coletta, who still campaigns in the Top Fuel Wars, still kind of learning the sport. Paul has not won his first race, but hopes to soon.
Young man has certainly showed a great deal of aggression, though, in his learning cycle. Very hot here today, Steve. Temperatures forecast to go into the mid-90s. Already it's 90 degrees very early on in the day.
Ed the Ace McCullough operates out of Hemet, California, part of the Larry Minor racing team. He's facing off with Scott Coletta from Michigan, and Scott dispatched Graham Cowan in the Aussie Raider in round 1, sent Graham back to Sydney, Australia. So Scott Coletta in the far lane, an absolutely beautiful car. It's amazing, Paul, considering the travel, the stress, the fires, the explosion, how they keep these cars looking so neat.
Well, of course, they spend a great deal of time working not only internally on the machines, making sure that they're tip-top, but additionally just making sure that they're well presented and beautiful when they come to the line.
Both drivers using the handbrake in the cockpit to inch forward, very carefully positioning their front wheels in those electronic beams. And away first is Scott Coletta. A tremendous hole shot by Coletta. He gets sideways and still wins it. Ed McCullough, for some reason, was 0.3 of a second late off of the starting line. Scott Coletta, the upset of this season, Paul.
Well, you know, really, that was a gimme because Coletta had problems. As you watch here, there's Coletta on the right side. He moves first by, as you said, a full 0.3 of a second. Finally, McCullough figures it out and charges on. Now watch, you'll see the wheels start to spin on Scotty's car. Had it not been for the late leave, he might have been grabbed.
Well, something strange had to have happened to McCullough on the starting line for this to happen. His 578 is defeated by a 6.07. That's more than just a hole shot. That is just positively incredible.
Scott, my friend, one whale of a hole shot.
I hope so. I needed it. And, you know, he's tough, and I was like 4 attempts slower than him the round before, and I had to go for it, and I was smoking the tires, and it did it again. He must have done the same. I don't know. Just tried my hardest.
Well, McCullough was in no mood to explain to us what happened. He headed straight back to his trailer. Well, here, standing on the throttle, unleashing 3,000 horsepower, Raymond Beadle in the Blue Max Pontiac-powered AA fuel funny car. Opens the roof hatch for a little ventilation. Dale Foley in the over-the-hill gang car, cool and comfortable until that body goes down. There's no side windows in these cars like there were in the old days. And, Paul, that looks like a beautiful new car, doesn't it? Well, the body is, but underneath it is a veteran chassis, over 7 years old, probably the oldest and still competitive funny car in the sport.
Well, Steve, when you're talking about temperatures here in the Arizona desert, as we go into the 90s, it's going to have a definite effect on these men. Dale Poldy, Granada Hills, California, beat Mike Dunn to come into this round and face Raymond Beadle from Dallas, Texas, the former world champion in funny car.
In fact, 3-time world champion. Now, Raymond Beadle is idling forward. He completed the long, smoky, wet burnout. Now he'll do what they call a dry burnout. And his crew will be watching those huge rear slick tires as Raymond kind of duplicates the start of the race. Now, it hooked up very hard, Paul. He'll probably come back and just stage the car, not do another dry. Had it twisted the tires, and Dale Foley may do the same thing here, they would come back and do that again, only an abbreviated version to make sure the car is going to stick.
The whole trick to find out exactly how much power, how much throttle you can give the car as you come roaring off the line. Remember, there's a great deal more power here than they can use in many instances.
That's right. That's why they use a multiple disc clutch that is adjustable and can slide some of that power until they get halfway or so down the racetrack where the clutch locks up completely. So it'll be Beadle in the near lane, Dale Foley in the far lane, Boldy competed on the national circuit for a number of years. The last couple of seasons has stayed pretty close to home. He's from California. Arizona's about as far away as he goes. And it's a beautiful start by both drivers, but Boldy veers to the left and may have grazed the wall. Raymond Beadle advances to the semifinals at 583, 218 miles per hour. Dale Boldy shuts it down. Did he get a little white paint on the side of that car? I think so.
Well, more than a little white paint, I would think, Steve. As we watch the car over in the far lane, he drifts into that gray stuff, kicks up a little dust, and then kicks it right against the wall. But very, very lightly, just a nice little soft kiss, and back onto the drag strip.
And back at the head of the staging lanes, John Force, his crew chief, Austin Coyle, waiting for the safety crews to check out the racetrack, as is their opponent, Mark Oswald and his crew. We'll be back with more funny car racing right after this.